Namaste, dzień dobry, assalamu alaikum, ciao, konnichiwa, hola, bonjour. Good morning, good morning, good morning. How are you doing today? Great day today. We've got lots for you today in terms of the general news. Just released the podcast for the week. Many of you will know I love a Friday. I know it's been a terrible week as well. It's been shocking, hasn't it? We've had interest rates go up, energy bills go up, national insurance go up. I mean, literally, it was bad news after bad news yesterday, wasn't it? Awful. And consequently, next week's podcast will be a special edition talking about what our landlords, tenants, and property owners can do to save money on their energy bills. So we're going to go through a few tips, hints, and tricks on that on the podcast. This week, we talk about different property styles and the week's property news as well. And that's live today. Find it on your podcast provider. Just search the Property Buyer and Sellers podcast or look up me, Ken Yu. So thank you very much for joining us today. Welcome if you haven't been here before. This is Ken at 10. We talk every day about the property market, both locally here in Norbury, SW16, which is between Streatham and Croydon, if you don't know already. And as far as the week's concerned, it's been crazy, really busy on lettings, lots of competition for new lettings stock as it comes along. Got one in Dulwich this week that's been absolutely off the scale busy. Lost a sale this week as well, which is always sad and frustrating. So we've got that back on. We're pushing hard to try and get that one back under offer. You know, it does happen to the best of us. You know, you can look into a buyer's eyes and say, are you honest? Do you have the money? There's your agreement in principle. We always check whether when a buyer says, you know, they've got the money, that we physically have seen evidence of that money coming in. But even then, even with an agreement in principle, lenders can at a later stage then reject that applicant for any reason, because it is just that, an agreement in principle, which means, yeah, subject to having a look at everything, you know, we'll say you're okay. And that's really a frustration with the system. I think we need to have something which is more of a license that would be really good to have. If we could have buyers with some sort of license that's not only an in principle offer, but a definite confirmation of an offer if the property is acceptable security for the loan, of course, rather than this in principle nonsense, which is really frustrating for everyone involved. Rant over. So apart from that, it's Friday. Fantastic day of the week. We love a Friday. Why do we love Fridays? Well, it's the day when we're pushing hard to get everybody out for the weekend, because the weekend is the peak time when people view homes to buy and to rent. Let's look at today's news. The levelling up agenda has been a lot in the news, hasn't it? And there's a couple of things in the levelling up agenda that have come along. They're going to make landlords do more improvements. The vilification of landlords is one of the biggest mistakes this government's making, in my view. And the reason I say that is I believe that there aren't enough properties in the build-to-rent sector, which will all be brand shiny new. And that's lovely if A, you can afford them, and B, they're abundant in your area if you're a tenant. And the truth is that they're a very, very small part of the UK housing sector right now. They are a growing one, and they will help some onto the ladder, but actually at the lower end of the market, they won't be there anyway, because the rents will be that much more because of the cost of these things, which is much higher, obviously, these days. So we do need a private rental sector, and the government keeps legislating against landlords, and the vilification of landlords is one of the things that I think is a real shame here in the UK. They talk about the landlords as though they're all rogue landlords, and the proportion of rogue landlords in the UK is infinitely small. I can tell you that over the years, I can only think of a couple of landlords that I've met that would refuse to comply with current regulations when it comes to making sure that homes are safe for tenants. I'm sure they're out there, and I'm sure they're not the sort of people that come to agents that insist that compliance is there. So it's not surprising I haven't seen lots of them, but I really genuinely believe and find that most landlords aren't the devil incarnate. They're just people who've invested in property, and they're looking to make that move perhaps for their family later, or for their retirement. Anyway, the levelling up move is also saying that they're going to legislate to provide more upfront information to prospective home buyers. This is in the Law Gazette, and it's part of the levelling up plans. It says transactions fall through, costing people hundreds of millions of pounds, and pledges to improve the system. The UK government industry will work together to ensure material information that buyers need to know, like tenure type, lease, and any service charge, are available digitally wherever possible. Well, this is all possible now. You know, the idea that we have to go through this big legislation process to make this work. How do you think we do auctions? We provide all this information in advance. You know, we do auctions regularly, and all that information is provided in what we call a seller's pack, including the searches, all potential questions, and that's why people can buy and exchange contracts in the auction on the day. So it's a myth that the ability to buy immediately is not available. The truth is you can't do it as a buyer, because the mortgages require certain hoops to be jumped through in terms of the lenders, for the buyers, and the solicitors have two hats on. They act yes for the buyer, and the buyer wants to get it done quickly, and they also need to check compliance from that point of view, but also for the mortgagees. And I do think they could streamline that process. So it's good to see they're looking at it. Let's see what happens. 10-year fixed rate cut by lenders. This is an interesting one given the backdrop, isn't it? We've seen interest rates rise this week, and yet 10-year rates have been reduced by Lloyds down to 1.66%. Halifax, meanwhile, have launched a 10-year at 1.6 for 60% home loan borrowers. Competition in the 10-year fixed rate market is fierce and has emerged as a key battleground for lenders. That's in the Financial Times and the Telegraph today. Most viewed homes have been revealed by Rightmove, and guess what? The luxury homes, the likes of which most of us could never get to. One is a £23 million luxury estate and a mansion in Cheshire for £6.5 million. Tim Bannister, the property expert at Rightmove, said January is often a time where we see property lovers escape the gloomy weather by looking at dreamy properties, from Norfolk to this one in Cheshire. Now, I think that's very true. And, we find this at Christmas. And so, a lot of people say, oh, Christmas, you've got to get your home on the market at Christmas because there's a lot of eyes on it. That's not true in my experience. What happens over Christmas is people look at their phones, they're bored, they've had the Christmas dinner, and they're looking at their phones and just wondering what's around, not necessarily thinking of moving at all. And quite often, to be honest, just wondering what their own home's worth. That's a big thing. So a lot of it is dreamy browsing, and a lot of it's not serious buying around the holiday periods in my experience. But when the spring hits, oh boy, is it going to hit this year? It's going to be busy, I'm sure, even given what we've seen. And I do think, given what we've seen, we have to, people say, oh, all these things will have a zero impact on the market. But that's rubbish. Of course they'll have an impact on the market. Interest rates going up, all these household bills, that will make some people lack confidence. And, the property market is built on that very fragile thing above all else, confidence. Are you confident enough to go forward knowing that your house price next year will be higher than it is this year? And I think that confidence is still there and will probably go through this year on the back of supply and demand being reduced. I suspect a lot of people that were considering moving might think now, time to batten down the hatches again. That's what us Brits tend to do when we're not sure is nothing. And so I think some people that were thinking about moving may decide to just hold fire and let things settle down a bit in the world. There's a lot going on after all, isn't there? Apart from that, the Metro features a range of advice from homeowners for anyone thinking of putting an offer. One suggests viewing at different times of the day to get a more realistic feel for the street. And another says that do more research on property websites to see prices over the years. Well, yeah, I would agree with that. But, we always say if you're looking at a house and you want to buy it, then think about going to that area at different times of the day. Of course, we always say that. But also go to the places you would typically go to. If you're a coffee shop person, go to a local coffee shop. Get a feel for who's around you. Do you feel comfortable in the environment? What's it like on a Saturday night? What's the local pub like? Walk in there, if that's your thing. Certainly get a feel for those around you. Get a feel for the neighbours and get a feel for whether you feel that you would fit into that community, because you're going to be there for a long time. If you're buying, chances are you need to make sure it's as good as it possibly can be. Inheritance windfalls are set to double. This is in the Daily Telegraph today. Analysis by the Resolution Foundation think tank suggests the wealth being handed down to younger generations will double in the next 20 years, with rising house prices and tax avoidance measures boosting inheritances. The value of inherited wealth will grow 100% as well. Almost half of people aged over the age of 65 will gift money during their lifetimes. Individuals born after the 80s will receive between 200 and 400,000 on average, the study suggests. It's interesting, isn't it, that the wealth will grow and grow. And this is one of the reasons why house prices manage to overstep the multiples of people's salaries. People say that, house price affordability is linked to people's salaries, but it's also attached to how much wealth they have in the first place. And often they inherit money and that money is put into the mix as well. Knight Frank is finding that London is continuing to attract huge overseas investment. That's in the Times today. And the property expert Phil Spencer is suggesting that adding an extension can increase its value by up to 20%. What is it about Phil Spencer and 20%? Last week, there was an article saying that he said that if you do the garden, it can increase the value by 20%. Now he's saying extension. There must be something about grabbing a headline and 20% that his advisors have given him. Because yes, it could increase the value of your home by 20%, 10%, 5%, or 100%. We don't know. It depends what you're doing and where you're doing it. And sometimes, actually, the extension is not worth doing at all. So my advice is don't just go on that advice. Go on local advice, speak to your local agents, people you trust and know, perhaps those that you bought through, and ask them what they think a likely value add would be for that extension. Because quite often, as I've said many times, the value add is less than the cost of the extension. And people go through all this hassle and sometimes go through a year or two's pain in dealing with builders walking off site, things they don't expect to happen, living through all this with their families, only to find that the value add is the same as if they'd left it alone because the cost has exceeded the value add. So be very careful and make sure you speak to local agents before you go ahead and do that. So apart from that, the weather here in Norbury is quite mild. We've had some rain this morning, and we always say, you know, if you like it in the rain, you'll love it in the sunshine. The sunshine, it looks like we might be repeating that mantra over the weekend. Let's hope not. Let's hope it's bright and sunny over the weekend. Thanks for watching. Hope you have a lovely weekend. Look after yourselves and your family and friends if you can. Stay safe and well. Ciao.